Welcome back, mindful parents. If you've clicked on this pod, chances are you're dealing with one of the most perplexing toddler behaviors, biting. And let me tell you, I've been there, I've seen it, and I know exactly how frustrating it can be. But fear not, because today we're going to unpack the why behind toddler biting and equip you with practical, mindful strategies to navigate this phase with confidence. Let's dive in. And welcome back to my channel and podcast, where we explore how to bring more mindfulness and understanding to our parenting journey using the Montessori mindful approach. I'm Soraya, and today we're tackling a topic that sends shivers down the spines of many parents: toddler biting. If you're a parent of a toddler, especially one in daycare, the very thought of biting probably makes you cringe. It's the absolute height of frustration when this behavior surfaces, takes root, and just persists. You might be asking yourself, why is my sweet, innocent toddler doing this? Why does this impulsive, increasingly difficult behavior develop? And how on earth can I apply a more peaceful, more respectful approach to deal with it? Well, mindful parents, let's start with a crucial perspective shift. Because before we dive into strategies, we need to understand the why. And the first thing that I want you to be at peace with, truly at peace with, is knowing and accepting that biting is often just a phase in your child's developmental process. It's not a personal attack, and it's not a sign of a bad child. Now, here's a golden rule of thumb that I like to apply, and it might sound counterintuitive at first. When a child bites, do not give it a lot of attention. This applies to many other challenging behaviors too, such as hitting, hair pulling, pinching, spitting. You catch the drift. You get the idea. The reason is quite simple. We don't want to inadvertently make that activity interesting or powerful for the child. Think about it for a moment. If a child bites and it elicits a huge dramatic reaction from you, it can actually make it a more potent tool for them. What might start as a simple, impulsive act, often an expression of frustration in the moment, can then transition into a very powerful way for them to get a response from you. And we absolutely do not want that. So, right from the very first reaction, parents, do not overemphasize interest with the child's biting. Acknowledge the behavior by all means, but do not make it the center of attention. So now let's look at first things first, our own adult perspective and attitude. This is paramount. Normally, the moment a child shows any sign of negative behavior for the first time, what happens? We, as adults, as parents, as caregivers, we get triggered. We become quite frustrated, even scared. We might lose perspective in that moment. And then we find ourselves stooping to our child's level. We go head to head with a toddler who is only a fraction of our size. It sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud, doesn't it? In the heat of the moment, we might be compelled to lash out, maybe even hit or bite back. Although I sincerely hope no one here is doing that. And I will elaborate further on that. But what we try to do is to regain control by sternly laying down the law or shaming or punishing our toddler, all in the name of teaching a lesson. And while the intention might be to stop the behavior, it often backfires and most likely aggravates the situation further. Or sometimes we go the complete opposite direction. We might be fearful of confronting our child's rage or even our own discomfort with such big emotions coming from a child. So, what do? We usually tend to back down. We give in to the child, to our child. We hesitate, we waffle, or we tiptoe around the behavior. We might plead or even pretend to cry so our child feels sorry for us. And while these responses might seem effective in dealing with the undesirable behavior in that particular moment, they often end up making matters much, much worse in the long run. Why? Because our intensity, and let me tell you, children are always very apparent to our emotions. Don't ever think they don't feel it. The intensity of our emotions can turn a momentary experiment, something they just tried out or maybe chanced upon without a preconceived intent to actually do the action. So something that they just chanced on the first time they bite you, they just chanced on it. The intensity of our emotions in reacting to the action can turn that momentary experiment into a chronic behavioral issue. Children sense it when the leaders that they count on, which is us, their parents, have lost control. And that makes them feel less secure. And paradoxically, it can also make them feel too powerful because it takes the power right out of our hands and into theirs. Punishment, when we apply it, creates fear, but it also creates resentment and distrust. And on the flip side, our reluctance to set a definite boundary or limit when there is an occurrence of such negative behavior also causes discomfort, insecurity, and more testing from our children. And then in the end, our own vulnerability, our own uncertainty often creates guilt within us. So ultimately, these common responses fail because they don't address the specific underlying need that the child is expressing through this so-called negative behavior or this so-called misbehavior. And what is this underlying need? It is simple. Help. Your child is expressing that they need help. Help is what they are expressing. Help is what they need. When young children act out, it simply translates that they need our help. It's as simple as that. But the big question truly is, how do we help them respectfully and effectively? Remember this, toddlers are just learning our rules and expectations of and for appropriate behavior. They have a developmental need to express their will, and they have very little, if any at all, impulse control. With these complicated, powerful dynamics set in motion or in play, why would we take our toddlers hitting, biting, and their resistance or refusal to cooperate personally? It often baffles me. Because if we can perceive our child's unpleasant actions as a young one's request for help, our role and our reactions will become so much clearer. Our reactions will become mindful responses. Again, that will be so much clearer when communicated to the child. As experienced, mature adults, this means rising above the fray rather than getting caught up in it. It means observing, understanding, and then providing assistance when we repeatedly remind ourselves that challenging behavior is actually a little lost child's distress call, we begin to see the ridiculousness of taking this behavior personally. We begin to realize the absurdity of reactions from us, such as, for example, saying that, how can you treat me like this after all I do for you? How ridiculous is that? You are talking to a toddler who's under 5 years, and your reaction is to say, how can you treat me like this after all that I do for you? Why don't you listen? This shift in perspective, this change in our mindset gives us the patience, the confidence, and the calm demeanor that we need to be able to truly help and steer our child through these challenging moments. So, for example, your 2-year-old toddler hits another child, whether it's at home or in a social situation, such as a play, out on a play date, even in nursery, or, just think whatever social context. Before you react, you need to understand where that behavior stems from. Why is it happening? Is a question, the fundamental question, mind you, that you should be asking yourself. Toddlers are very conscious and very much aware, but their behavior isn't always calculated or premeditated. Toddlers express, demonstrate, and showcase negative behavior usually out of pure impulse. They have very little self control, and we as parents, adults, caregivers need to remember this. They desperately need us to handle their escapades confidently without getting angry, without letting our emotions get the better part of us. Quite often, we unconsciously help to foster these negative behaviors without even realizing it. Take, for instance, when our child first accidentally, out of impulse, bites us at the nipple whilst we're breastfeeding as mothers, or when they hit us smack in the face for the first time. For most mothers, the instinctive urge is to react. So a gasp, an expression of shock on our face, or most likely a playful ow or ouch, followed with a smile. And sometimes accompanying that, perhaps a low pressure bite to the baby's finger, or even a returned smack. This, from the child's viewpoint, gives interest to the act rather than correct it. Yes. At this point, they may find your reaction more on the amusing side and register it as engaging. It's a complete myth that a bitten back baby will not repeat the action. In the short term, yes, perhaps in the short term, but that memory is always short lived. And one could even argue that repeated mirror reactions will ironically send the message home that this is an effective way to get attention. So, until they get a full set of teeth or truly realize the painful effects of biting, that impulsive, attention seeking cycle can continue. Now, let's break down the reasons why toddlers exhibit negative behaviors like biting and why it might occur. Thank you for your time. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself throwing light on this developmental challenge that a lot of parents seem to grapple with. But this is only part one of the topic on negative toddler behavior, specifically biting. And I'll end part one's conversation, which was centered around the adult's perspective and attitude, the impact of parental emotion, how it can unintentionally reinforce the behavior and create a long-term or lasting impact, and the critical role of understanding where the behavior stems from. I do hope it's been quite insightful for you as well. Stay with me. In the next part, which will be my next post, I'll break down the reasons why or the conditions that may trigger negative behaviors like biting and why it might occur. Once again, my name is Soraya Kofi, and thank you again for listening. You may find me across all social pages, especially on Instagram, under my handle at A Mindful Method with Soraya. Follow and turn on notifications for my channel and my podcast to be the first among other community members to receive updates on new topics that I will be discussing here. You can also follow my conversations at my hashtags all across social at hashtag A Mindful Method with Soraya and hashtag Montessori mindful approach. Remember to like, share with other parents of toddlers, especially ones you know who might be struggling with biting or other challenging behaviors. And do comment, as I would love to hear from you. Thank you, and stay mindful, parents.